Record. Thank you.
So welcome to Grounded in Grace. Welcome to all of our guests who are joining. This is for the recording here. And we're beginning with a poem by Jane Hirshfield called On the Fifth Day. On the fifth day, the scientists who studied the rivers were forbidden to speak or to study the rivers. The scientists who studied the air were told not to speak of the air. And the ones who worked for the farmers were silenced, and the ones who worked for the bees. Someone from deep in the Badlands began posting facts. The facts were told not to speak and were taken away. The facts, surprised to be taken, were silent. Now it was only the rivers that spoke of the rivers, and only the wind that spoke of the bees, while the unpausing, factual buds of the fruit trees continued to move toward their fruit. The silence spoke loudly of silence, and the rivers kept speaking of rivers, of boulders, of air. Bound to gravity, earless and tongueless, the untested rivers kept speaking. Bus drivers, shelf stalkers, code writers, machinists, accountants, lab techs, cellists kept speaking. They spoke the fifth day of silence. So I love that poetic multiplicity of being about what is it to be silenced? What is it to continue to speak? What is it to continue to speak into the silence? And I think let's bring all of that complexity with us as we come into full presence. So for a moment, make sure that you close all the other tabs in your computer, in your life, in your mind right now. It's really easy to multitask and listen with part of your mind or part of your presence while doing something else. I want to really encourage you to be all the way here. Bring yourself all the way present. Allow yourself to drop into the breath, the air that is moving through you, the air that the bees speak through. Begin feeling your body and the river of breath that comes into your body all the way down to where your body touches ground, touches earth, touches this big global planet that we're sitting on and all a part of. And then letting your spine rise with the breath, letting yourself grow a little taller as you're both rooted and rising in the breath and in full presence. Bring all of yourself here. Your mind, your heart, your body, your spirit, all of the feelings contained within this incredible ecosystem that is your being, that is interconnected to our larger ecosystem and world. Continue to let the breath fill all the way to the top and empty any tension all the way to the bottom. This constant process of filling and emptying out. Allow yourself one more breath to really anchor in this moment. And then letting yourself slowly begin to flutter open the eyes. And I'm going to invite you to stay with this full presence, letting the rest of the world do what it does, but letting go of the burden of having to be responsive and responsible to the rest of the world as we just bring ourselves fully present into this Grounded in Grace workshop. With that, I'm going to now turn this over to my dear colleague, who is also an eco-psychologist like myself, but has many different disciplines and has worked in supporting many people and especially our scientists in this really difficult time, especially in the United States. So Debra Borys, over to you. Borys. And you're muted, so let's unmute you.
Thank you,
There you
Nikyta.
go.
And I just lost the presentation part. Let me get back to that. Here we go. It'll take me just a second here. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of some of the different ways that scientists especially, but it's true of everyone, can be impacted both by the ongoing and expanding climate crisis and also the actions that our government in the United States and some other governments have been taking against scientists. So the first thing I want to talk about is something some of you may have heard of, and it may be new to others of you, called moral injury. It's an idea that was first recognized in returning Vietnam vets. And what moral injury is when an institution whose authority you are under or depend upon that had espoused certain positive values and commitments that you shared, then contradicts or violates those values in their actions towards you or towards others. And it typically causes harm with those actions or omissions. So you can relate, those of you in the United States as scientists, to what's been happening lately. It's also considered moral injury if an institution whose authority that you're working under or depend on requires you to act in violation of values that you previously, positive values that you previously understood that institution to share with you and that you understood would support you in carrying out positive actions with those values. And again, that when they're requiring you to act in violation of those values, it ends up being a serious risk of harm to you, important needs or safety for you or others. And it's also been called, as you, I think, will relate, institutional betrayal trauma, a betrayal of values. Even before the disparagement of science and other really awful, morally injurious things started happening in the United States and to some extent in other countries, just with the climate crisis expansion itself, scientists recognized that a moral injury, even if they weren't naming it that, in the way that you all know what's coming and what has been unfolding for years now, with destruction to the environment, greenhouse gases, everything about climate change, pollution, and so on, and the huge disparity between what's being done by industrialized countries, especially a great injury to the entire planet, the global south, what's being done in terms of mitigation, prevention, slowing it down, versus the terrible injurious effect on people, planet, animals, etc. So there was moral injury there, and the powerlessness at governments not even keeping to commitments that they've made, including the various protocols and so on. Now, moral injury can cause a feeling of demoralization, powerlessness, depression, anger, shock, numbing. And as I go on now to talk about more broadly the common psychological impacts of layoffs, funding cuts, science disparagement, other recent stressors, everything I'll talk about in terms of general psychological impacts can be an impact of moral injury as well. So we have on the one hand, not purely because these overlap, but the focus on emotional, that you may recognize anger, fear, like fear for the future, anxiety, fear for your jobs, etc. Some of you may have experienced layoffs already, anxiety, embarrassment, numbing as a way to deal with just the overwhelm of all these different feelings and what's going on, depression, grief and sadness, irritability towards others in your life. Oh, I see a typo, excuse for that. Re-experiencing of emotions or memories from other traumas or major stressors you've been through in your life. Then we have the cognitive. When it's really overwhelming, you may find yourself just wanting to suppress thoughts, denial as a way of coping, distract yourself. Some people cognitively find themselves focusing on self-blame when the anger, the helplessness gets too much. Sometimes we restore or try to restore a sense of control and focus irrationally on blaming ourselves and finding fault with us. And sometimes thinking we're weak for having distress over really awful and untenable sorts of events and changes in our environment. I mentioned distractibility, intrusive thoughts while you're trying to focus on other activities or work, replaying events or occurrences, whether in your life, your work environment, or the political environment, for example, the planetary environment, ruminating about what ifs for the future, feeling worthless or weak sometimes. And then if you have actually lost your job or been demoted, some people experience a big change in their identity, in their family or household, if for a period of time while unemployed, for example, not bringing in income, and maybe that's a huge change in your role, or being at home when you're used to being at work and you've lost your work and community group. Let's see. Then beyond the cognitive, we've got, and emotional, we have actual behavioral or physical changes, pacing back and forth, low energy, sleep or appetite changes, weight changes, headaches, various kinds of stomach distress or tightness in your muscles, getting sick easily, like your immune system down, or finding that you're intaking drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, weed more, increase in gambling, porn use. Now, all the things I mentioned so far are really common reactions to a distressing, stressful, other than supportive environment or political environment. If things get to a certain point where it's dangerous to you or disabling your daily functioning, that might be a time where one needs to seek out one-to-one counseling assistance. So it's good to know for yourself, for others, what are these sorts of harbingers. If you find you're having panic attacks, trouble sleeping most nights where you're tired or sleepy during the day, weight loss over 5 pounds from not wanting to eat, significant weight gain from overeating to soothe yourself, certainly any suicidal thoughts, explosive anger, thoughts of violence, or relapsing when you were previously sober from an addiction of any sort, reckless driving, not being able to parent the way you're used to, major declines in your grooming, activities in your daily life like not feeling motivated to shower, staying in bed all day. Those would be signs maybe to consult with a professional. And then I would just want to go into some other facts to know about emotional reactions, some of which are, let's say, self-defeating beliefs about emotional and other psychological reactions that it's good to realize are not in our best interest. So all of the reactions to stress we've been discussing so far are very normal human reactions to abnormal situations. You are never weak, crazy, or mentally ill to have any of the reactions I talked about. And, we've been brought up in our Western culture to have this very illusory mind-body split. Those of you who know the history of it, the Cartesian mind-body split from Descartes. In reality, this is not scientifically based at all. The highly integrated human mind, body, emotions, and spirit are very intertwined for up to 100,000 years to respond to really stressful disruptions and threats in the environment with any of the types of symptoms or reactions we've talked about, and you've probably heard of fight or flight. We now know that reactions to highly stressful events can be fight, meaning try to attack back, which doesn't have to mean physically, can be flee, either mentally or get out of this, a desire to get out of the situation. Freeze, meaning numbness, feeling a sense of paralysis, overwhelm, helplessness, or please, appease, trying to, and we see this, unfortunately, with some nations, some politically, of trying to deal with the source of the problem by pleasing them, hoping that they will cease, the traumatic, attacking sorts of actions. So all of these four, fight, flight, freeze, or please, appease, are a response to a sense of threat, and originally had very adaptive aspects, and they still aim in our system, our bodily system, to achieve an equilibrium, but they have side effects if they become unbalanced, or they take away from some of our self-care, some of our relationship activities that are actually nurturing. It can also be really confusing if you notice, as most people do, that you have a range of the different types of emotions and reactions. Some people feel like, wait, yesterday I was angry, or 5 minutes ago I was angry, and now I'm suddenly tearful. That is actually normal. And one step towards calming is allowing yourself to identify and label each of the emotional states that you're experiencing and each of the reactions. There are no bad, wrong, or illogical emotions. I often talk with people about how your emotional state and these bodily and cognitive reactions, as well as emotions, are a register of impacts on you in the same way as a thermometer registers signs of your body working to quell an infection inside. It's giving us important messages. Let's see. And it's really important to challenge if you notice you have inaccurate beliefs about emotions coming up, such as some people believe if I really feel my emotions fully, I'll become disabled or have a mental breakdown, or have a belief, I just need to suppress an uncomfortable feeling or distract myself and that'll get rid of it. And you may notice when you try to do that, if you try to suppress it completely or for too long, it's going to fight its way back because it's got important meaning for you where you need to set aside time. And you could do that with a helpful other person, whether that's friend, relative that you trust, or a professional, but they need time for expression, identification, exploration. They won't just go away because they're trying to convey, it's like an alarm to you about the impact of what's going on. And most
And in
people
the
do
spirit
find
of that, we'll wrap up in like 2 more minutes, Deborah. So that little very gentle alarm. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Please continue.
Thank you. So most people actually do find if they spend some time identifying and expressing, using coping techniques to deal with vulnerable reactions, their capacity for joy and relaxation is actually restored sooner than they even expected if you give them time. And finally, I just want to talk about some messages that are typical in professional socialization as a scientist that may not be ideally helpful. We already talked about the mind-body split. Sometimes that comes out as a belief in training that you're taught that to be a professional, a good scientist means keep your feelings out of your work, focus only on reason and intellect. We talked about the fallacy in that, and the human body is just not built that way and has important messages that come from other than just the mind in terms of how our environment's impacting us. The focus on quantity, productivity, publications, number of publications is focused on in training often as like, that's what makes a good scientist. And being focused in any profession just on produce is often going to backfire in terms of self-care. Then there are special challenges faced by those in leadership, department chair, work team, leader sorts of roles. Leaders often gunny sack, like set their own stress aside later. I'll deal with it later. I have people I'm responsible for, carry the responsibility or the sense of responsibility for the whole team. Sometimes are put in a moral conflict between obeying superiors versus wanting to take care of subordinates and mentees. People experienced this as department chairs when Doge came in, and they saw that their own job as a department chair was directly being threatened by Doge, and yet they wanted to protect like the lifelong data of subordinates and mentees. Horrible situation. So it's very important that old metaphor is not just a cliche of your own oxygen mask first, like on airplanes. Leaders need to have time they are taking for self-care to be able to be the most effective and protective leader. So with that quick overview, I think I will turn it back to who, I forget which of us, perhaps it's Nikyta, is going to set up breakout rooms. Nikyta, do you want me to talk about, just give the prompt, or are you going to do that?
Perfect. Go ahead. Yeah. Continue on with that.
Okay,
That's
so
great.
you're going to find yourself invited to a breakout room with, I think it's 3 or 4 other people. And what we'd like you to do is talk about what do you identify from what was talked about, and it may be not just the examples that were talked about, of emotions, bodily reactions, ways that the stress of the current environment is affecting you. What did you resonate with? And in terms of moral injury, what kind of moral injury conflicts, do you come across? Have you been experiencing? How do you relate to that idea of moral injury? Because there's plenty of forums for dealing with employment issues per se, like finding a new job. And there's also plenty of other sorts of forums for dealing with politics. In this breakout room, we do want to focus on things other than that and focus more on impacts on you personally, in your personal life, struggles with stress, and have a voice for that in this breakout. So I think Nikyta is arranging those right now that you'll start getting the prompts.
I've got them. Yep. And we're going to go in for 12 minutes. So you're in groups of like 3 or 4. Feel free to be equitable with time and give everybody 2 or 3 minutes. Or if someone needs to or would like to speak more and someone wants to listen or speak less, feel free just to be equitable with your time. So we'll see you in 12.
That's
Sorry, you're
too
muted.
funny.
Hi. I brought you all back in. I didn't know if you wanted to be included with everyone. We had a rapid drop off. We lost about
Yeah.
half of our people when we went to breakout rooms. So I was shifting them on the fly, and moving them from they were at perfect 3 and then they went. So apparently people were expecting a lecture. They weren't expecting an interactive piece.
That's too bad.
Yeah, wow. Okay, well, maybe for next time we'll know to talk with them about what the breakout room, maybe it was, so you think maybe it was scary, kind of scary, like, whoa, okay, so maybe to talk with them. That's really interesting.
I
I mean,
did say
Yeah.
to them, this is going to be interactive. I often tee up some of these sessions by saying this is going to be both praxis and information sharing. So turn on your computers, be ready. That's why we're grounding you. But yeah, really interesting. And it's a lot of who I call our frequent attenders who are in and here, and a lot of people from like the Resilience Mindful Mondays are
Mhm.
here and participating.
those are the ones who stayed, you're saying?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
used to
there's
the
Didn't
format.
drop
Makes sense.
off.
yeah, there's only 7 people left. So we started with like 21 or 22, and now
Yeah.
there's 7.
Oh,
So
wait, so out of the 80, there are only 21 came to the
That's
first
wild.
we just never
Wow.
know about these things. It's always so wild
That's
to find out.
surprising. I mean, we always have drop off, like similarly, 50 to 60%
Yeah.
drop off from registrants, but this is huge drop off. Wow.
And we have, well, it's just who registers for free events. And a lot of people register and then they want the recording later. So they want the information, but they don't want to participate. We have a new person, Salib, coming in. I'm just going to welcome them and then get them into a breakout room. Hello, Salib. Hello and welcome to Grounded in Grace. Just to let you know where we're at, we just had information sharing and a grounding in this work, and now people are in breakout rooms. If you can come off mute, would you like to join a breakout room?
Yeah, that'd be great. Sorry, I'm so
Okay.
late.
Oh,
Thank
it's all
you.
right. I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Me too.
There you go. You still have about 7 or 8 more minutes in breakout room, so you're getting in the front end of it. All right.
Yeah, I'm intrigued about this degree of drop off. So I'm trying to think like, no, I don't know that this would make any difference. One of the things that we have done, again, it doesn't feel like it really could make a difference, is it once people are registered, but before the day of, we have, and maybe you guys did this, we have sent out something saying, we don't call it ground rules, but it's like ground rules, like there are going to be portions where people will be invited to share reactions. You are never required to, and but know that whatever you might say will be very meaningful and help others. And we ask that by showing up, everyone who does agrees that they will not share anything about someone else's disclosures. I don't, I mean, I don't, you may have even done that, but if not, I don't know that that's decisive. And we repeat that before breakout. We don't do it by breakout because we usually have like just 12 or 20 or something, but we repeat it right.
Second.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We want to say a huge thank you to those of you who stayed and who were brave enough to be in breakout rooms. I know those of you who've been through Terra.do expect that, but not everybody does. So I really appreciate you all being in there. What came forward? Does anybody want to share anything that came forward or that might want to be spoken to? Was there anything in Debra's work that also came forward that was interesting to you, or that you wanted to name? And feel free to raise a hand or feel free to just come off mute. We're a small group now, so we can have a more group discussion.
I just want to say thank you for reminding us that many of these different emotional responses are normal and that we're not the only ones having them.
Ugh.
I think especially like it hadn't occurred to me that re-experiencing of, emotions and memories from other things can be triggered by something that may on the surface seem unrelated. I've definitely experienced that in the past year, and it hadn't occurred to me that there might be a relationship there.
Ugh.
Thank you for naming that. Absolutely.
Same goes for me. I'm not a scientist. I'm not based in the US. But the fact that you just name moral injury and name like all the symptoms and how it could manifest, I felt very seen because it was just literally this morning that I finally wrote down. I called it personal unraveling moments. So just moments when I was at work and I was just like, I am not like, this is against my values. I'm not going to represent this. But I tolerated it. I like, it's okay. You justified it. You would then experience all of like, I felt like you just described my whole year with all of those emotions. Like, oh yeah, I went through all of that. And just this morning, I was like, you know what? I want to just write down like this moment. And now I was like, okay, these are all my moral injury moments. Like these are the collections of all those wounds and scars that I thought was just normal. Just like, okay, that's fine. Uh, but it made me feel seen. It's like, okay, that is actually an actual term. And it is like all those symptoms and all those things that you experience. It's not just because you are crazy or you are too. Sometimes I felt like others are fine with some of these. They just executed whatever their boss they need to do, or they just accepted it as a way of life because otherwise the risk is too much. Why couldn't I just tolerate it? Why do I have to actually have a physical body suffering for like all these moral injuries? So yeah, thank you. It felt very timely somehow.
Remember too that you don't need to feel bad about continuing to do your job in the face of something that you know is wrong, because we all have responsibilities, we all have people to take care of, and we all need to eat. So don't add that heaviness to yourself.
Yeah. Perhaps I can share sort of an illustrative example that I just sort of remembered in this session listening to Debra, which was about institutional betrayal trauma. Before I before basically USAID was destroyed and my organization laid off half its staff, we had to go through a sort of life-saving procedure where we were trying to just keep our projects uncanceled before they were canceled. And one of the things I had to go through, which I still feel like is affecting me to this day, is this thing called DEI certification, which means that we had to talk about each of the projects that we were working on in different parts of the world. And in my case, I was working on women's empowerment and community development in African countries. We had to go through with lawyers and talk about how we promised that there was no diversity, equity, and inclusion activity that we were doing in any of those projects, which for me, actually the essence of some of the things I was working on was indeed equity and inclusion. But it's just that those words couldn't appear in any of our documents. And so for me, that left me feeling dirty, I think would be a word for it. It was awful. And shortly after that was when my organization had to make the decision to do layoffs. So yeah, that really resonated with me, and I'm really grateful to be able to put attach some words to it, and that this is something that it can be named. So thank you, Debra, for that.
Thank you
I
for
wanted
sharing.
to say, yeah, thank you, Debra. This concept of moral injury, one of the things I like doing, I don't know if it's because of my stubbornness or what, is I love having discussions and arguments with people from different beliefs and ideologies and all of that. My intention isn't to challenge and to prove someone right or wrong, but the intention is like, just question things. Maybe they are right too, and maybe I'm wrong, coming from that perspective. And I always felt like we all are reacting to things, but I think you gave for me, I feel you gave the umbrella pain that at the end of the day, we all have moral injury. We just have a different reactions to it. Some come from a place of hatred, which I always felt there could be something deeper, like if someone is forced to hate someone, then there is a deeper pain. But I feel like this term moral injury, especially from an institution or establishment, that's the common pain across. We just react differently.
That's such an excellent point. Just to make a quick comment, Lilith, I appreciate you bringing it up, that even though anger in itself, anger is related to hate, of course, is a totally legitimate, real emotion, usually beneath anger or hate is fear, helplessness, or deep hurt, more vulnerable emotions. So great point you made. Thank you.
Debra, I wonder if we might talk about what helps. So now that we can identify and get these really like articulate words for what hurts, can you tell us a bit more about what helps in these moments?
Sure. And I want to mention, first of all, that any form of mind-body integration, grounding exercise, whether it's breathing relaxation related, like Nikyta did for us or took us through, or yoga, meditation, and I'll talk about other forms of emotional and physical grounding exercises. Having some regular practice, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes, ideally every day, but the closest to every day, even if a particular day is not stressful, it really does enhance what your nervous system can handle in a healthy way if you have a practice like that. And we call that, what it does to the nervous system, in part, increasing your window of tolerance, increasing naturally and in a healthy way your ability to manage and move through the kind of stressors you're dealing with. A Finnish researcher named Panu Pikala has identified that he first worked just with people's climate distress, but now he's found this applies to all sorts of distress in the current poly crises we're all dealing with, that there are 3 different categories of coping mechanisms that I'm about to introduce you to. And each person, if they find what for them is a balance between having some of each that they're doing, and the balance will be different for different people, but that to make sure you're doing some of each and not ignoring one of these 3 sectors, makes for much better coping and reduces the likelihood of depression or anxiety. So I'm going to talk about examples of each. So the first, some form of emotional expression or sharing. This could include talking in a group with people who are safe, talking one-to-one with someone you trust, or with a professional as well. Could also include journaling, artistic or musical expression, movement expression, just voice recording on your phone, some way that you're regularly, ideally once every day or so would be great, letting out what are the emotions, anger, fear, etc., the list of actual emotions and what you're feeling them about. Let's see if there's any part of that I left out. Some scientific groups have started planning regular get-togethers. For some of them, it's, getting together at some other location, in a park. It's ideal if it's not with a lot of drinking involved, because you want to be meaning like happy hour, as we call it in the US. But if that's the way it's done, just, ideally people being grounded and sober enough where they can actually talk about feelings and have it be somewhat grounded. But some way, many scientists have arranged to have some regular get-together like that for venting and mutual support, as well as it being important that you have some way you're regularly doing that yourself, and some form of nervous system regulation. As I said, grounding exercise, yoga, meditation, something like that. Then the next category that Pikala identified of the three is some form of timeout from the stressors. Timeout from the news cycle, from reading about the news, doom scrolling on your phone. Timeout also includes making sure you're getting as good a diet, some form of exercise that works for you, enough sleep, and working to remedy any sleep problems, limiting alcohol and drugs, and time for hobbies and with people you are close to and have fun with. That is one of the ones that I find scientists might ignore the most. That you really need to make time for that in your life, as well as the emotional expression. The third area is some form of action, which may or may not be actual activism, where you feel it, and it can be in a compact way, you feel you're working on addressing solutions to the problem or addressing protests for the problem. That, for some people, in terms of climate change, that has just been, what can I do in my household or in my neighborhood to mitigate greenhouse gases? For other people in the current environment, action has meant letter writing, marches, phone calls, emails, posting important things that are important to them, activism related, voting, promoting legislation. For some people, it's donations to organizations that are working to make change. But to have some piece, whatever fits for you and fits your personality, time, and energy, where you feel you're making some contribution towards change, that helps with helplessness and powerlessness. So those three entities, can emotional expression, an area of emotional expression, making sure you do the timeout self-care, and having some form of action or activism. And in a subsequent program that we're going to do, we're going to help people develop their personal self-care plan that works for them. I think we have a handout that's going to come up. So I think we'll be moving on to another aspect of this called the resilience mindset, that I'll start and Nikyta will then take up with. We encourage you to take a coping versus a mastery approach, what that means is not see yourself as you have to perfectly master stress, which no one can, but to see it as, in our current environment especially, as well as in all of our personal lives, there'll be repeated things that come up that are stressful, and to take an approach as you're going to develop your internal tools, your behavior that helps you cope, and you're going to learn to work on moving through it, coping, reachieving an equilibrium there's not going to be a perfect way of mastering it and of being impenetrable to stress. That instead you're going to work for coping and moving through it rather than thinking you're perfect at it, because no one can be. And so all of the things we've been talking about are part of the resilience toolkit. I'm going to actually let Nikyta take over. I think you're going to talk partly about the ecological mindset anyway, so maybe I will hand over to you to just talk about that whole part.
Sure. I think I'll finish out. So we have all of these pieces in there. Um, I'll just stop sharing my screen because I see we just have a few minutes left. And the entire slide deck is already in your chat window, as is the handout. So Deborah, thank you for that. Yeah, I love an ecological schematic, or thinking in terms of the metaphor of ecology when we think about ourselves as a whole ecosystem, right? So what makes an ecosystem resilient is very similar to what makes us resilient. Being able to be adaptable, being able to, I love this framing of going from mastery to like the perfect vegetable, right? The perfect, if we use an ecological metaphor, right? To like what has emerged, and how do I meet it with grace? And how do I have diversity? How do I have adaptability in my own consciousness? And how do I not be so tied to a fixed identity? I always have to be producing. I'm a plant that produces corn, and I always have to produce perfect ears of corn every time, all the time. But instead saying, oh, there was a huge drought, and so my kernels are smaller. Or what are the other plants and beings, or the other kinds of supports that help complement me in my being and my expression? And maybe I'm not this singular thing. Maybe I actually have a rich diversity of identities and self that help me to be adaptable. So I know many of you who are faced with these radical confrontations of identity when your primary work is taken away radically with this intense moral injury. There's this sense of like who I was and who I thought I was has been so impacted. So how do we have a rich sense of identity that can continue to say, I have all these skills within me, I have all these talents within me, and now I'm going to use them in different forms of expression. Now I'm going to adapt to them in very sometimes clever. I'm thinking of you, Abby. Just really thinking about what needs to be done and how do I maintain and adapt my identity while still holding what is essential and precious to me. So for me, resilience mindset is really about how do we cope and adapt well to the changes in the changing world, while maintaining enough of our essential structures to have a thread while we continue to evolve our sense of self. I see that we only have 3 more minutes. I like that my corn analogy worked for you. That's great. Um, uh, Dinya, is there any questions as we round up our last 3 minutes, or anything that wants to be said before we conclude for today? I also want to name one thing, which is we'll put a spreadsheet into the chat window for ways to stay in touch with each other. And also, if you enjoyed this, what did you like? And we just have a few questions at the end of this spreadsheet. We'd love to offer another deep dive into resilience strategies and also thinking through how we can be of service in these communities of care. Like how can myself and Debra and Abby and Kate continue to show up for you all? And what do you need? What did you like? What do you want more of? What was helpful? So if you can help us with that, that'll help us shape future offerings. And we'll just put that into the chat window in just a moment here. But any concluding thoughts or questions before we sign off for today? Yeah,
Just want to
Hillary, go
say
ahead.
thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so
Absolutely.
much. One of the things that Dinya and I, we hadn't seen each other since our Terra program together as pangolins, was when she ended on the perfect sort of sentence. We were talking about how it's important to gain courage, and I feel like that's something that we do in this community. Like we've had to learn this in a way, to learn that there's incredible risk involved. but confronting this climate, this issue is really the place where we learn about ourselves, which is incredible. And to me, like learning just the resilience, but also the resistance to what is out there is really important. And so that's where I am on this. And thank you so much for
Absolutely,
providing
Hillary.
this.
Thank you for speaking to
Yeah.
that. Any other last thoughts or questions before we round up for today? Will you put into the chat what is one word or two words of something that was helpful for you today? Will you just put, even if it's just a concept or a thought, or what was really helpful for you today? Just put one word into the chat as a final closing as we round up for today here. No need to produce perfect corn every time. Love that my better work for you. Community. Oh, great. Learning resilience and resistance. Hillary, thank you for naming that. That you're not alone. It was thought-provoking, naming our trauma. I know for me, it was concept of moral injury, giving a name to what I've been feeling. Great. Abby, Kate, Debra, anything you'd like to say in this last minute here?
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to, oh, go ahead, Debra, sorry.
Oh, I was just say thank you all for coming and really appreciate everything that everyone shared, including just being present.
Yes, absolutely. And just a note, thank you all for being here in general, right? Like in coming together and sharing space. I know that Nikyta and Debra are interested in perhaps doing a little deeper dive into this. So if you would like to be part of that, please do note that on the spreadsheet. You can share your contact information as much as you wish to or not, right? If you'd like to talk in other ways, Abby and I are always welcome, or excuse me, always open. And I hope that everybody take something with them today that helps them practice hope going forward.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. We'll sign off now formally. So if you have to go to your next meeting, but we can stay around for a few more minutes. So if anybody continues to have questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to sign off if you're needing to be on time, and otherwise feel free to hang out if you'd like.